What's up, YouTube? Welcome to Introduction to Relic Knights Part 4. And in this part, we're joined by Phil Howard. What's up, Phil?
How you doing?
Doing all right. So, in this section, Phil and I are going to talk about everything card, basically. So, to give you guys a little understanding here, Relic Knights is currently one of two miniature skirmish games out that are completely diceless. In other words, no dice are rolled in this game. All of the mechanics of attack and defend are governed by a deck of cards that are a battle deck. So that will make this game, I guess, be compared in a lot of ways to the Malifaux game. However, as we'll talk about here, the use of the deck in this game is significantly different than the way you use a deck in a game of Malifaux. Okay, so first up, Phil, we're going to go through and we're going to open up this battle deck, and if you will quickly or briefly describe the contents of the deck here as we open it up. So when we first open the deck here, first thing to note is not all of the cards are these like colored dots, right? So what are these cards here?
Well, first off, let me say that if you're just getting into the game and you're watching these videos as a way to sort of build up your basic understanding, kind of know what you're getting into, every battle box starter that comes with your basic starting army of a questing knight and a few squads will come with a battle deck included. Now, this battle deck is essential for play with the game because in addition to having the card mechanic that the game is fueled by, it also has the scenarios and a variety of action cards. Like right there on the screen, you see creation scenarios, you've got void scenarios, law scenarios, and then you get to your essence, your actions that you can do with every different kind of Esper there is. Then there's a couple of utility cards. Things like token keys. There's a lot of different effects that you can do, and that's a good way to mark down what each token can do in the course of a game. Boost markers, that card is also a handy utility card for keeping track of victory points earned, especially in multiplayer games when you get a couple of people involved and it gets a little confusing trying to track who's got what scenarios complete.
And then finally, and I left these two cards out. Sorry, I left them out here. These are also part of the battle deck. So these are the objective cards. So in the game Relic Knights, and we'll explain this at a later point, each player starts with 3 objectives on the board, primary and secondary objective. And as it turns out, those objectives have their own statistics. They can actually be damaged, and they have sizes associated with them, armor and height. So these are essentially stat cards for your objectives.
Right.
Okay. So, let's move on to the actual deck itself.
Okay. You've got 3 kinds of basic cards in the deck. Octave's holding right there your standard card. It's got 2 different colors of Esper on it. The smaller one at the top of the screen is a Chaos Esper worth 1 Esper, essentially. And the one on the bottom is the Doctrine Esper, yellow Esper, worth 2 points. It's easy to remember. 1 is small, 2 is big. Every card has some combination, or most of the cards have some combination of 2 and 1. And so the cards that you're holding in your hand will give you a variety of different colored Esper to use for different abilities in the course of a game. Until you get to that Void card. That's a null card. It's got no Esper associated with it. It's essentially a blank. It doesn't count for anything, and so it's kind of dead weight. And that's the opposite of that. It's the Wild card. It's got 1 of every kind of Esper on it, so you can use 1 Esper of any color that you need with that card.
Okay. So, so you've got your Wild. This is worth 1, 0, and then like you said, these are worth, the big dots are worth 2, and the small dots are worth 1. Can you use both values of the card at the same time?
No, you got to pick and choose which one you want to use. So you're going to need some combination of multiple cards, even if one of the cards you're holding has all the colors that you need, colors and number.
Hmm. And so that does kind of it does put a little bit of a spin on the resource management aspect of the game. Um, like Phil says, you're going to have during the course of the game, you will usually have 5 cards in your hand, and it will be up to you to decide. Okay, so for example, this hand that I've got here, you can see I have lots of yellow in this hand. So if I were a Doctrine player, I'd be pretty happy with this hand right now. But there are going to be some cases where I may need to access the green, or I may need to access an orange, and sometimes you're throwing away one of your, 2 of your primary Esper in order to power an ability that might require that orange down there. One other thing I would point out with the Esper deck itself, and you will probably need to know this if you have a whole bunch of these battle decks, because the game is so cheap you may end up with multiple starters and you may have multiple battle decks floating around. One thing to note when you are trying to make sure you've got all your cards, essentially every card that you have exists in triplicate. So for example, this large creation, small essence, there should be 3 in this deck. So I've got 2 right there. I'll probably flip really quickly here to try to find the third. No, that's the opposite. But yeah, there should be 3 of every, here it is, of every type of card. So that's how you know you have a complete deck. You will also have 3 wild and 3 void. And I think that puts you at like 42 cards total, 42 playable cards here. That's an important thing to be aware of when you are not exactly counting cards, but just to give yourself a general understanding of how much of what Esper you've burned through before you've cycled your deck, and to give you an idea how much is left in the deck. So, like we were saying, 3 of each card, and then if yellow were our primary Esper, you'd have 3 there, and then you have several of these large 2 Esper decks there. Now, one of the things that's different from this game and the other game that uses a deck is there's no numeric values to the cards. I guess you can call the Esper Manifest a suit, but it doesn't really function that way. And the other thing I'd point out is the other game is more about flipping cards off the top of the deck and then cheating in a new card. Relic Knights is about really kind of crafting your deck to use your abilities. So you're gonna collect your primary Esper. You're probably gonna discard cards that you don't need and hope to cycle 2 cards that you can use, and you're usually not flipping the cards off the top of the deck and hoping for something to happen. You're generally crafting your resource the entire game.
Yeah, without getting too much into the weeds, essentially, if you're the active player, you have the opportunity to draw and discard cards at the end of your turn, and cycle through your hand to help customize your next turn. What do you think the other guy's going to do, and prepare for defensive maneuvers, or if you're setting up for some attack or combination the next turn, what cards will you need to pull that off?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Great. Okay, well, that's kind of a good segue to move us towards the, what actually uses all this Esper, which are the actual characters. And in Relic Knights, every character or every unit that you have in the game is going to have its own set of unit cards. And this video is a little misleading because it's going to make it look like there's only 1 card for each unit, when in fact every unit has 2 cards. So we're using the Novitiates here as an example of a set of unit cards, but and I'm just going to ruin this lamination for the sake of you, the viewer, just so you know, I'm going to relaminate it later. It's okay. But yeah, just to show you guys, I'm going to tear that off. Each card, each unit has 2 cards. You have basically your character card here, and then you have your abilities on a separate card. Now, as you guys saw, what I did was I just took the 2 cards and put them back to back through the laminator and laminated them that way. So I have 1 card that I really just turn over when I want to access abilities or I want to access the unit statistics. Knights are the same thing, and I'm not going to tear this one open, but Knights have a small size or a standard size character card, and then they have a double-sized ability card. So what I did was I laminated, again, back-to-back, put the character card with its back to the ability card, and so it's just 1 card for me that I turn over. But, Phil, you were mentioning that you actually do this a different way, and it works out a little bit better for you. And what way is that?
Right. If you, by this point, you've probably covered the whatchamacallit, the playmat area, the dashboard.
Oh, no, we actually haven't done that yet. Okay. But that's okay.
Well, when you get to the dashboard, the point of the dashboard is that you set your cards up in a queue with the ready model on the left and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I find that it's easier to put the character card right there, the novitiate's card, up in the queue, and I can see their stats, I can see their life, I can see the cards that they draw and any health esper that they've got, and they move throughout the queue or into the idle pile as necessary. Mm-hmm. While I always have their abilities off to the side in front of the dashboard where I can always see what they do, and I don't have to keep flipping over cards, risk erasing marks that I've made on it with the dry erase marker, that sort of thing. I like being able to see all the information I need without having to flip the card. Mm-hmm. So that's why I put them in individual sleeves.
Okay, cool. And actually, I think I see more people doing that than doing the double-sided method that I use. And I think it works great. To your point exactly, that this card is just going to keep moving through the playmat, and you're always going to have your abilities in front of you. So do you want to take us through these 2 cards and just a brief description of how to read these cards?
Sure. These are... The cards at first glance are a little bit daunting, but if you know what to look for, you can pretty much find everything you need to play the game with a minimum of reverting back to the rulebook. If you start with the novitiates, this is a squad card, which is a little bit different than individuals, but only in one way. I'll show you on the ability side. Mm-hmm. For the most part, okay, at the very top you've got novitiates, the name of the unit, what they are right underneath. They belong to the Doctrine faction, and they're a minion squad. This is important because if it says unique, you can only have 1 of them. Fairly obvious there. Their faction symbol is off to the left, and that empty square off to the right is for your use to mark if you want to. If you have multiple squads of novitiates, you can say Squad A, Squad B, whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Right below that is the cost. That it looks like coins. It must be the cost. It's 4 plus 1. So what it is for the base size of the squad, it costs 4 points to hire this into your cadre, and then plus 1 for every additional member to add to the unit. Mm-hmm.
And we're going to actually we'll show that again when we get to the abilities section, or the abilities card, exactly how that works.
Right. The next icon is the base size. They're all on 30mm bases, and they're height 2, which comes into play when you're talking about terrain, blocking, cover, line of sight, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Moving down the left, you've got all their abilities. You've got movement, you've got melee attack power, ranged attack power, psychic attack power, and armor. Each of those numbers is paired because on the for the movement one, that's in inches. You can do your first movement. The novitiates can move 6 inches, then they can execute an action, and then they can move a follow-up move of 4 inches. You don't have to move the full, but that's the limit that they can move each time that they move. After that, you've got melee attack powers. So if they're going to execute a melee attack, they have to be able to pay for the action out of the cards in their hand. Once they do that, that one means that they get to draw one additional card in case they want to press anything, which we'll get to when we get to the actions. The second number, the 2 there, is if they are the target of a melee attack, they can draw 2 cards to help them defend against it.
Okay.
The next one is ranged attack, follows the same formula. 1 card when they're attacking, and they draw 2 cards when they're defending. Psychic, they draw 2 cards when they're attacking, and draw 2 cards when they're defending. And the armor rating of 0 means that they don't reduce any incoming damage because they have no armor. Underneath that, you've got 3 empty globes, if you will. Those are spaces that indicate how much held Esper they can have on the squad. Held Esper is powerful because if they can generate a held Esper, whether through a focus action or by coming into contact with a boost or by getting it from another model, a held Esper is worth 2 Esper of any color. So that you can use that to fuel abilities as well.
And it needs to be the same color when you do spend a held. So it's 2, but it has to be, if you're going to say it's 2, I'm going to spend my held Esper, you can pick 2 green or 2 yellow, for example, but you can't pick 1 green, 1 yellow. And
right.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally under there you've got the life. Each model is separated. One model will have a big block of those little spaces to mark a life. Each novitiate has 3 life, essentially. So every time you mark off a group of 3, you remove a model.
Okay.
That's it for the front of the card, although there's a little quote down there that says, "You're kidding, right? We're totally going to die."
Yes, and that is something that novitiates do quite well,
Yes.
which you'll probably see in a video at some point. All right, so moving to the abilities card.
Right. The same format for the top applies here. You get the name of the unit and what they are, Doctor and Minion Squad. And then you've got all of their available actions that are inherent to this squad. Now, it's important to note that based on the knight whose cadre this is, they may have additional abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Because
example,
I was going to ask, I'm looking here, and I don't see any melee type abilities. However, there is a statistic that says if I'm performing a melee attack, I would draw 1 card. So, just because it doesn't exist back here doesn't mean that there might not be a situation where you end up doing something like a melee attack.
Right. Not to mention anything that modifies an attack. It specifies use your melee attack ability or something like that. But in this case, the novitiates, as they come on the card, they have 2 primary actions. They have a psychic attack called Elementary Strike, which costs 2 yellow essence espers to cast, and does damage 6.
And then that's a psychic attack because of this icon here on the side.
Right.
Okay.
That icon matches the icon on the front of the card, and it's a psychic attack.
Okay.
The little icon below it that looks like a chevron on its side, that's a press. So without getting too much into the exact turn order, essentially, you pay for the ability out of the cards in your hand. Your opponent has the opportunity to declare if he's making any defenses or anything like that. And then after you draw your cards, you can attempt to press and go for the extra action, that extra ability, by paying extra Esper for it. And that's a good thing to have held Esper for, and that's where the cards that you draw come in handy. You might not be able to do the press with what you have to start, but sometimes you get lucky.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The next action is for them is exams. It's a support action. It doesn't match the front of the card because it's something that they do without relying on one of their melee, ranged, or psychic skills. They have to have 3 orange espers, and then it tells you exactly what to do. You flip 3 cards from your deck, and they gain 1 held Esper for every point of essence. Every yellow that they flip, that's how they gain a held Esper for it. And then they have a press for that. If they press with 2 green, they also gain 1 held Esper every time they flip a green essence, a green Esper, I should say.
Okay.
Once you get past the actions, on every card there's traits and abilities. Traits are describing factions or factors, because some cards will only affect some squads will only affect squads, that sort of thing. They are human, they are novitiates, and they are a squad. And the 1 parentheses 3 is what we were talking about with the squad cost. When you purchase this squad for 4 points, you get 1 novitiate. You can pay 1 extra point up to 3, or for a maximum of 3 people in the squad. So this, to sum up, basically the squad costs 4, 5, or 6 points, depending on whether you have 1, 2, or 3 people in it.
Right. So just to kind of sum up, when you're buying a squad, the first number is to buy, the first cost is to buy the first number listed under squad, and then the plus number is to add what it costs to add additional members to that squad to a maximum of the number in parentheses.
Yes.
Okay.
And then you've got abilities. The abilities come in handy because these are special actions that will affect how they play in the game. They have the ability Esper Initiate and Psychic Choir. Esper Initiate gives them access to certain Esper actions, which are...
I'm trying to find it.
There we go. Yeah, I've got it in front of me now. There you go. The Esper actions is another card that comes in the deck, and it provides general actions available to people who are used to working with Esper. Initiates are generally able to get access to, I believe, cleansing.
Yep.
And masters are able to access all 3.
So yeah, we'll actually talk about masters and initiates in another section, but just pay attention to, if you see keywords like master or initiate, it will be referring to additional actions depending on what the character's Esper affinity is.
Yes.
Okay, great. So that was an example of a squad card. We're going to go into a little bit more complicated card here. So we're going to go actually into the starter box master here, Delphine. So if you want to, well, actually, I'll just say real quick, the character side of the card for a master, pretty much the same information that you have on the on any of the minions or uniques. Same information, it reads all the same. You just might see slightly better stats. For example, here 3-4 on the psychic, a lot more life boxes, more places for held Esper. That's what you're paying attention to on the character side. But Phil, there's a couple of additions here on the knights that are different than other cards, and we can just call those out because it looks like this side here, the abilities themselves pretty much read the same way as a standard character ability card.
Right. Going down the list, she's got all the same types of things. She's got actions and abilities on the right-hand side. Some of them are important because they link to other things. Like, for example, Best Friend there mentions that Ekis, which is her cipher, her companion that goes with her everywhere. And so abilities like that are important to note, especially when they reference other models that may be in your cadre. What you're talking about specifically, though, as far as the main differences, is that on this side of the card, you've got the cadre ability down at the left. You've got traits. She's a human. She's a novitiate. She's got abilities. Cipher, Ekis. She's a creation initiate and an essence initiate, which gives her access to special actions on those cards. And then finally, the cadre ability, Esper Master, she grants that to every person in her cadre. So it makes everyone far more formidable when you look at all the variety of actions that you can do with Esper, being a master versus just being an initiate.
Mm-hmm. Cool. There is, now that we're looking at this card, there is one other thing that's different on a Relic Knights card. And let me grab one real quick, actually.
Oh, versus a questing knight?
Yes. There is one difference on that the questing knights don't have that the Relic Knight has. So here's Kisa. And the only thing that's different, you can see the character card's the same. And the abilities are the same. The only thing that's different is this section up here. Now this section for Relic Knights is the area called Esper Expression. So Relic Knights, and typically not questing knights, have additional abilities that they gain or bonuses that they gain based on the amount of held Esper that they may have at any point in the game. In the case of Kisa here, she actually gains value in her held Esper the more held Esper she retains. So for example, if instead of held Esper being worth 2 to her, if she were to have between 3 or 4 held Esper on her, each one of those dots essentially would be worth 4 Esper. So that's how she manifests Esper. You can see, for example, Princess Malia, she'll have movement bonuses, and that's kind of how it goes for Relic Knights. So that would be the only mechanical difference between reading the Questing Knight and the Relic Knight card. Okay, well, I think that pretty much covers how to read the cards, both the battle deck cards and the character cards. Anything else you think we need to add, or any comments we want to have as part of this section before we close it out?
The only thing that I would mention as far as the battle deck goes, you've got your cards with the scenarios on them, and the game does a pretty good job of explaining how there's diametrically opposed forces as far as Esper is concerned. So law is obviously the law is obviously the opposite of chaos, and essence is the opposite of corruption.
Yep. Glad you called that.
And, and creation is the opposite of entropy. So
okay,
because they're exact opposites, they're on the opposite side of each card. Prismatic is the other one that's in there that its opposite is void. So you've got, it's easy if you're looking for one and you don't see it because you've got 1,000 cards in front of you, look for the opposite and it'll probably be on the back side of it.
Mm-hmm. And one thing about these scenario cards, which we will cover in another section, is that scenario cards are typically broken into primary, secondary, and then the faction objective. So just so, if you're, depending on how you flip the scenario, you might be playing a primary chaos scenario and a secondary corruption scenario, for example. So we'll get into that, though, when we talk about game setup and choosing scenarios. All right, well, I think that would pretty much cover it for this section. I want to thank you guys again for continuing to watch this series, and if we don't have anything else to add, I think we're going to sign us out. So that's going to be it for this section. Thanks for watching, guys, and we will catch you on the next one.